welcome to the 7th Circular African Cities Community of Practice session of the year. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. We are hosting the session in both English and French. So please just go to the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and select the interpretation sign to choose your preferred language to listen in. Also, just a note that if we do have French participants, our English speakers would need to be tuned in English just so you're able to hear them when they do speak and able to either respond or add on to some of the insights that might be shared. Today's topic is titled, How Are We Applying Circular Economy Knowledge Across Africa? A review of the Circular Economy in Africa, Examples and Opportunities paper series. So the aim of today's session is to just get engagement around the papers and to get different perspectives on how knowledge in general, circular economy knowledge at large, can then be applied or taken up in different contexts across the African continent, especially against the backdrop of there being so many pieces that have come out over the past year or two on circular economy, and looking back at how just 2 years ago, we were having discussions around the need for more circular economy knowledge. So what are we doing with what is emerging right now? What are the gaps that are showing up, and what opportunities exist for taking this knowledge further and actually applying it in the different sectors that we work in? So today's session is going to be an interactive one. Later on, we will be bringing on the mural platform where we will be able to all just jump on and put a few ideas on sticky notes of ideas that we have with regards to the topic. So feel free also from now on just to jump into the chat and share any comments or questions that you may have as we go along. Now to begin, we can see a number of familiar faces, but also some new ones. And so just to get everyone acquainted with each other, I just wanted to take a minute or two to ask everyone to just in the chat, just put in your name and where you're joining us from, just so we get a sense of who's here and where in the continent you are located. I'm also just going to do the same. So definitely a welcome to everyone, but also just highlight some of the people who have joined. So hello to Sarah, hello to Stacy, hello to Zakia as well, to Wekesa too. Thank you all for joining, and we will be keeping tabs on who's in the room and just saying hi as well. Hello to Bronwyn as well, and Bongiwe. So everyone just keep track of who's here, who you might be familiar with, and who you'd like to connect with. Before I go into a presentation on that just summarizes some key points from the papers, it won't be exhaustive, but it should be able to give you an idea of what each of the papers within the paper series covered. I would like to just also find out how many people have read the papers or are familiar with the papers, and perhaps for those that may have, what sort of insights you've gotten from it and the value that you've derived. So I'm going to launch a poll, and if you could just quickly respond to it on whether you have read one or more of the articles in the Circular Economy in Africa, Examples and Opportunities paper series. Have you just read one? Have you read more than one of the papers? Have you read more than one and used them as insights for your work? Or have you not read the papers at all? So far, we have about 14 responses to the poll. Most people are saying they have not read the papers. So actually the presentation that I'll give right now will be very valuable to just giving a sense of what the papers are about. And hopefully that will allow us to then have a discussion around the papers. But also just to note that that will not limit you from not engaging, because we are expanding the discussion to beyond the papers and just circular economy products that are being written and published more frequently at the moment. But just a summary of the insights that have come in, we are seeing that about 3 people have read at least one paper, and another 3 have read more than one. And we have one person who has actually been able to use the insights in different pieces of work that they're working on. So I will jump into the presentation just now. If you could give me a moment to just share my screen. While I'm doing that, I can already see a number of other people that have introduced themselves. Welcome to Tamsin, Nicole, Shazia, and Patricia. Okay, so this is now a summary of the Circular Economy in Africa, Examples and Opportunities paper series. Just as an overview, this paper series looks at the potential for circular economy in key economic sectors across the African continent. It focuses on lessons as well as inspiration that can be drawn from existing practices from different parts of the continent that can be shared across different regions and applied with obviously tweaking and adjustments. It also covers the opportunities in terms of economic development and job creation and the wider social and environmental benefits. And although although the majority of the papers are focused on key economic sectors, there is the inclusion of public policy as well as finance that basically show enablers for the circular economy. This paper series, I should add, is a joint effort that was led by 4 organizations, which was Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and there were also inputs from ICLE Africa, from Chatham House, as well as the University of Lagos. And so the paper series includes a total of 8 articles on the circular economy, covering questions and insights about accelerating the transition in the African continent. And so when thinking of how is the circular economy being implemented in Africa, it covers automotives, the built environment, electronics and e-waste, fashion and textiles, finance, food and agriculture, plastics, and policy. I will try to give at least a summary of each of the papers, but for some I will also extend it to a few case studies that were shared in them. So starting with the finance article, this one highlights the need for finance to support more than just waste management and to reduce products that end up in landfill sites. And so it encourages this by encouraging innovation, informal sector integration, and SME support, especially the repair, reuse, and resharing models that have been elevated. And so the article includes examples of finance measures for circular economy when it comes through 4 strategies, and these include public sector financing and technical assistance. It includes blended finance models, impact investing, philanthropy, grants, and risk capital. And so here we get examples of ways in which local governments can support circular economy activities, but also how they can leverage different sectors that are offering support. And so through the articles, we then learn about the value of directing investments and funds into circular economy initiatives. One of the examples that is given in this article is one of global financing that's gone into a circular economy business. And so the Global Innovation Fund has invested in the development, testing, as well as scaling of circular economy innovations aimed at improving the quality of life for financially vulnerable groups. And so here we are seeing how they invested in Mr. Green Africa, which is a tech-based company that focuses on plastics recycling. And what we saw from this case study was that great value can actually be seen from the work that Mr. Green has been able to do with the funding received. And so they've been able to facilitate job creation. They've also been able to scale their business to recover more waste, as well as invest in technology to improve their own operations. In the fashion and textiles sector, what this article then shows is how there are many African designers and tailors, as well as entrepreneurs, that are leading the way in circular fashion and skills, as well as business models. And it also then highlights the potential that lies in investing, as well as scaling up these circular jobs to tap into further income, as well as job creation opportunities. One of the pieces that is highlighted in this article is how the hashtag Made in Africa is gaining traction across the continent, thus highlighting ways in which you can focus on, or rather hone in on a sector and rebuild it, especially in a lot of contexts where there has been previously high investment in textiles, and we've seen a lot of those companies fall over decades, but we are now seeing like a reemergence of these sectors with circular economy principles being applied in some of them as well. When it came to the built environment article, it then highlighted ways in which circular economy can be used to build cities and urban environments through three strategies. So one of them was how you can design out waste and pollution by sourcing local and reclaimed building materials. Another was how you can incorporate bioclimatic as well as passive design and resource capture. And then the other was on how you can design for modularity and flexibility. How can you ensure that materials can be used in one space, but can also, once say a building is either not required or would like to be refurbished and redesigned, how can you then keep those materials in use, because they've been designed with that in mind. The next article was on electronics and e-waste, and this article also highlighted 4 strategies for circular economy through e-waste, and these were firstly, the first one being repairing, remanufacturing, and upcycling to extend the use cycle, as well as create employment in this sector. The second was then how can we capture the economic opportunity of urban mining. The third was on how we can scale up e-waste recycling to create income generation opportunities. And the last was on how we can then harness the enabling role of technology for e-waste management. And so one of the key case studies that was shown here, which comes from West Africa, was Itera, the company that is based in Nigeria, which is leading e-waste management. And so this company is pioneering the recycling processes by reducing the need for mining new materials and new metals, and thus showing how we can minimize the exposure of workers to toxic components of e-waste. And one of these examples would then be how they recycle, how their cable recycling equipment can strip and shed about 100 kilograms of cables per hour in an environmentally friendly manner, which is a solution that we need across the world. When it came to the automotives paper, this article then showed how circular economy principles can be applied to the automotive remanufacturing industry in order to improve material management strategies, to increase resource recovery, and to minimize pollution and waste generation. And so the key opportunity for Africa as this article then highlighted, is how we can then invest in the creation of more formal automotive refurbishment, as well as repurposing clusters, which then hold the potential to improve the recovery rate of materials from end-of-life vehicles, as well as enabling local material feed-in mechanisms in order to lengthen the lifespan of vehicles, as well as to remanufacture some of the spare parts that come. And so 3 strategies were then highlighted through this article, which included leveraging repair and refurbishment, recovering materials from end-of-life vehicles for secondary applications, and then the third one being implementing product stewardship in order to invest in local industries. The food and agriculture article showcased how a circular economy food system can strive to have a positive impact on people, on the planet, as well as on business. And this was done through the 3 principles of eliminating waste through food loss reduction, keeping materials in use through food waste valorization, as well as regenerating natural systems through regenerative food production. And so this article then covered agricultural productivity, it covered food security, it covered food safety, and it covered dealing with growing volumes of organic waste, all of these being key challenges that many societies across the continent are seeking to resolve. Something additional that the paper also then focused on was how the role of design and technology can be used to empower food designers to offer healthier solutions for the food challenges that we are seeing. One of the examples that was given there was the case of Chanzi, which is a startup in Tanzania that uses black soldier fly larvae to create feed for fish and chickens, as well as to create organic fertilizer to help grow healthy crops. And this case study basically shows how black soldier flies can offer a solution to managing organic waste, as well as nourishing communities through organically fed crops. When it came to the plastics article, this article encourages the reduction of waste by offering a vision for Africa where plastic never becomes waste. And this is being presented as an aspiration or an inspiration for different countries. And so what we are seeing from the article is 3 strategies that can be taken on, which are elimination by removing unnecessary packaging, reuse, which can be done through refillable as well as returnable packaging towards more affordable products. The other is material circulation by keeping materials in economic use and out of the environment. Something else that the paper also covers is further highlighting EPR schemes as well as digital innovation as being vital to transforming the plastics industry as well as our consumption and production patterns. The public policy paper then highlighted that we are seeing a growth in the number of policies that support the circular economy transition across all scales, these being national, continental, as well as global scales. And so the article highlighted how policymakers are able to leverage the circular economy and its principles to achieve SDG goals. One of these being SDG 12, which is on consumption and production patterns. And so in so doing, offering solutions and approaches that can help to manage urban resource challenges. And so the article also then expands on the EPR policies as a tool for managing packaging. But the 3 considerations for policy that are discussed in this paper are how to our comprehensive circular economy policy strategies, participatory multi-stakeholder policy making, as well as the role of trade policies. the example that is then given in this article is that of the City of Cape Town's Green Procurement Action Plan, which is a case study that shows how you can then embed circular economy criteria in public procurement. And just having taken an excerpt from that policy, what we're then seeing is that they've used the wording of circularity to showcase its inclusion and those principles. And so just to read what is written there is that procurement decisions should ensure products and services take into account the three principles of circularity, namely design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use by purchasing for durability, reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling, and the last being regenerate natural ecosystems. And so what we're seeing here is an example of how through policy you can be intentional about the principles that you would like to see shape the way the city at large is using or procuring resources and materials. So thank you. What we're now going to do is just go into a quick discussion on some of the insights that have been shared. I'd like to hear from everyone in the room on their thoughts about the paper series. Are the ideas that have been shared new to Africa? Are they new to you? Or are they still relevant? Have this being a paper that was published over a year ago? So just to get a sense from the room on these key questions. I can see some people thinking. You are free to just unmute and just share any reflections that you might have on the key ideas that have been shared through the papers.
I'm obviously biased, Jakuru, because I was part of the team that was involved in putting the papers together. My overall kind of reflections have been that last year was a really big year for circular economy and Africa research being published. So these papers were technically started at the beginning of 2020. Actually, the first discussion happened in December 2019. And then we were planning to kick off at the beginning of 2020, and then COVID happened, which just kind of delayed everything because remote, we had never kind of, as EMF, we had never written papers with 3 other organizations before. So the more organizations you add as co-authors, the more complex it is to kind of coordinate how that all works. And we were all getting used to remote working in a way that we hadn't done before. But it meant that last year when the papers were published, it was a really big year for circular economy research in Africa being published. So there's a suite of papers that we published together. There was the African Circular Economy Alliance's 5 Big Bets paper, which was published. They published before this one, so we tried to make sure that there wasn't a lot of overlap and duplication, and the examples that we were highlighting were different to the examples that the 5 Big Bets papers were highlighting. So maybe that's something interesting for everyone here to be aware of. There was also the European Commission published the 8 country reports and an intercontinental report on circular economy in Africa, as well as like various other papers that were published last year. So to me, it felt like last year was definitely like an accumulation, like we'd been waiting for some time for a really good foundation to be published. And yeah, my hope is that when someone reads the papers, they do feel like they're adding to the circular economy discussion in Africa rather than repeating a lot of what has been known. Oh, there's also the Footprints Africa case studies that were published. So it was a really big year for circular economy research in Africa.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And just from the list that you've shared, that's just a handful of so many others that have been shared. And I'd like to get a sense of whether everyone feels the same. Have you been seeing all these publications come up? Have they crossed your radar? And what have been your thoughts? At the end of this session, we will share a number of these resources that have just recently been shared. But also just to note that for some of the questions that are coming in the chat, I do know that someone has asked for a copy to the automotives paper. I will share that one as well. So Sarah, you have your hand up. Please do unmute and just share.
Yes, thank you. I'm from Durban. I'd say I haven't read them all. And I'd say for me as an NPO who's trying to get a SMME startup going in Durban, they are useful in terms of giving the confidence to see other exemplars out there and to know, you know, that other people are similarly doing innovative and bold things and getting them off the ground. So that is helpful, I guess, to give one confidence and see what else is happening out there. That's just, that said, the SMME space is still a very hard one to, you know, to get into, and to start a new business is difficult. And also working with others in the circular economy space, you know, it's quite a new concept to a lot of people. So for example, I'm concentrating on food waste and composting food waste. And, you know, people look at me as if I'm mad to say, but, you know, why do we need to bother? Just don't bother, you know. So it's quite a challenging space, but it feels as though it's a good space to be in too. And I will definitely make sure I look at a few more of the publications that are out there that I haven't yet seen. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. I think I like your reflection, especially highlighting the confidence that comes from seeing different case studies that are being highlighted. And I think that's one thing that I think this the series of articles was able to do. It didn't just give it didn't just give opportunities and ideas on what is happening in the circular economy, but with each paper you see a number of examples that show how you can actually apply the circular economy in a different context. So perhaps just to hear from others who else might have gotten confidence from the papers, but also something I want to throw back to you, Sarah, knowing that we do have two Sarahs here. Sarah Alson is with there being that challenge around the SME space and this being a new field, what sort of like research have you been looking for? And when you look for ideas, what is it you're looking for that would help you, either be it to build confidence or to give different ideas for what you can do in your specific case, the food sector?
Yeah, look, I think we've conducted a pilot project and we feel quite confident in that this can work, but it's I suppose I'm going to say, and it's going to sound a bit cliche, that this is the first thing that small businesses ask for, but you know, it's a lack of funding to just take us that little bit next step forward, to you know, possibly rent an electric vehicle to employ a couple of staff, and I think we'll get there, but it's just a difficult space right now. So what else will help me? I guess it's the confidence of someone in the circular economy space saying, well, here we go, take this bit of cash and see what the, you know, how the next step goes. All the information is out there in terms of what we need to do, certainly in the composting space, I feel is quite clear. And we also in South Africa now have a national imperative, not that that really means anything to businesses, you know, there's no enforcement of it, etc. So even though we're meant to be diverting food waste from landfill, certainly in my province, I'm not sure that's ever going to be instituted. Also, we've got this disjunct in terms of that the municipality here itself gets the gate fees from organizations going to landfill. So there's no incentive for them really to stop waste going to landfill, because then they'll have less less income from the gate fees from landfills. So as the landfills are municipally owned. So that's interesting. I wonder if the municipality is thinking about that. Sorry, I'm not really answering you perhaps, but that's my further thoughts.
No, you have answered it. And I think for me, something that's been sticking out is also just the idea of having innovative sources. What I've presented today is papers and tangible pieces that you can then look at, but we do see knowledge coming from different sources. This platform, different webinars, training series, and those two are knowledge products that we can leverage. Tamsin, you have your hand up. Please do come in.
Hi, thanks. We actually had a session yesterday in the city of Cape Town as part of our food systems working group that looked at a variety of waste-related issues. And we had a presentation from Sam Smart from Green Cape on the black soldier fly. And he said that the weight of there are a number of different products that come out of the black soldier fly life cycle, but there's one particular one that by weight is actually more valuable than cocaine. And I mean, I was thinking how there are already a number of companies working in the black soldier fly industry in Cape Town. And it's a massive missed opportunity for the municipality, because now they're going to need inputs into their system, organic waste, etc., for their flies. Whereas if the city had kind of cottoned on a bit sooner, maybe we could have set up our own black soldier fly factories, etc., and we could be making compost cocaine. So it might not be a bad thing that sounds like the city of Durban is not is not activating alternative separation and organic waste diversion, because maybe there's an opportunity for the municipality to set up its own factories and hopefully get up and running. And because it sounds like, certainly in Cape Town, I'm not sure if it's South Africa, we're a couple of years ahead of Europe, but there's a massive demand in Europe. So it could be a really, really nice export product, as well as in helping us with our organic waste objectives, etc. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tamsin. It's always nice hearing case studies and examples and ideas that are emerging from the city of Cape Town. And I think what you're saying is also very vital, making those connections with, okay, opportunity might have been missed at the moment, but what further opportunities could come from that intercontinental trade, different avenues that can then be considered. I'd also like to hear again from anyone else in a different space. We've heard from the SME sector, but we'd also like to hear a little bit again. We've heard from local governments. So if anyone has an experience that they'd also like to share, what may have stuck out to you from the papers. I can also see that Bongiwe, who is noting that she does have microphone issues, would like to ask a question on which policy types have you found to be very effective in advancing circular economy in Africa? And maybe before I go to the second part of it, I'd like to then throw this back to, again, some of our city officials that are in the session. Tamsin, just to hear from you again, if you do have a response to this question, but we also do have colleagues from Nairobi. I can see just anyone from a city context who would like to reflect on policy types that they found to be effective, or policy types that you've tried out that and what has been the experience from those. Patricia?
Thank you, Jokudu. And it's good to see the reflection of the papers. Yes, I had skimmed through them, and the one that I managed to go through in detail was the one for finance. And what I can comment about that is I feel that there's need to work together with other development partners in seeking funds, because I've seen in government we don't have that culture of proposal development or seeking funding, and mostly it's usually a push from externally. So yeah, that effort to do it from within, and if we can work together more collaboratively, then I feel that we will inculcate that culture and also develop that capacity, because that's another issue about the capacity on proposal development to seek those funding, because I saw there were quite a number of options in terms of the mixed funding from other financiers, and then complementing what's already in the government budgetary allocation, then what we have from the private sector. Then sometimes from the private sector, we've seen that they also expect funding from the government. They feel that that's, in the case of waste management, they feel that that's a role of the government. And then from the government side, we see like that's a role of the private sector, they should invest. So when you have that stalemate, it becomes tricky. But I feel that if we come up to other ways of working together, collaboratively with the people, the private sector, and the financiers, then we will be able to come up with sustainable initiatives when we seek such funds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That's a very wonderful reflection. The challenges that come from both ends. I think I also hadn't thought about that when it comes to financing and the challenges that government faces. And that highlighting that value needed, that value generated from co-development of policies or of solutions. What role can government play? What is government capable of doing? Where can the private sector step in, and what investments can they offer, and how can these be merged in order to respond to the key issues that are emerging? And also, again, then shifting back to the question that Bongiwe asked about policy types that are effective in advancing circular economy in Africa. I think from Patricia's reflection, it's collaboration that's needed. I had seen another hand, but it has gone down. Please do raise your hand again. I apologize that I did not note the person who had raised their hand. We would really love to hear your reflections. And while we wait for that hand to come back, I am nudging you. I'm wondering if there's anyone who is in the academic space in this session today, and what your thoughts are on either the research that you're doing when it comes to circular economy, or topics and ideas that you are interested in. I'm not sure, Stacey, if you're actually raising a hand or just clapping.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Great. So I'm not in the academic space. I'm an independent researcher, and I've just been skimming through the reports, the papers, as we've been talking. Really impressive, the amount of data and research that's gone into demonstrating the value of circular economy and the kinds of benefits that it could provide. And of course, at this stage, the best we can do in terms of what is actually happening is case studies. But it would be really wonderful to try to collect some quantitative data, or to perhaps attempt some sort of index or some way of measuring the impact of some of the interventions and the initiatives that have been happening. Case studies are fantastic, and it's so wonderful to read them, and I think they have so much value, as some of the other speakers have mentioned, and it highlights things like the tensions that have been brought up by different speakers, between the different stakeholders, and things that we can really start. It highlights those in a way that quantitative data can't. But there's a lot of power behind collecting impact data, monitoring and evaluating the actual impact of some of these interventions and initiatives. I wonder if anybody has anything to say about that, if maybe those who are involved in the papers know if some of the interventions are incorporating monitoring and evaluating into their work.
Yeah, thank you so much for that reflection. I would also like to hear from the group on whether anyone has thought about data from that perspective. Is anyone monitoring and evaluating? Before I do share one resource of an organization that has been doing work around measuring. Also, just to note that Sarah Carroll has been sharing a number of wonderful resources in the chat, including links to the papers as well. So please do also you can save the chat so that you have access to these resources after. But yes, back to Stacey's prompt on whether anyone is doing any measurement work on circular economy. And if not, that's still okay. So just also to reflect, Footprints Africa has been doing work around this and supporting the measurement of circular economy, although that work has been largely focused on SMEs across the continent and how they can use a framework for measuring circular economy through their through a business's value chain. And so although I can't speak much to it and I have not seen any colleagues from Footprints Africa, we will definitely then after this in the session digest include links to the work that they've done. So to jump into the next segment of today's session, I would like us to then jump into a thinking space and just reflecting. Again, we've started sharing some reflections and what has been shared now, if you did share, you can still write those down onto the board. But I'd like us to jump onto a mural board. Zakia has just shared a link to the mural board, and if you could just jump onto that, and I'll give a quick sort of like tutorial on how you can use mural for anyone who isn't familiar with it. But Zakia will be sharing her screen so that you're able to see everyone else's inputs. And if you aren't comfortable with jumping onto mural, you're also welcome to put your comments and insights in the chat or just to voice them, and I will put them onto the board as well. But what we would like to see from everyone is starting off with the first question that's there on how are we using emerging knowledge to improve our sectors. If you could then reflect on how you are using the knowledge that's emerging from circular economy in your different workspaces. We've seen from Sarah Alson on how she has drawn inspiration and confidence from the papers. So if you could jump on the board and just start sharing some of the different reflections you have. And these could be from either the paper and the insights that were shared today or any other sources of circular economy knowledge that you've come across. So for anyone who is not familiar with Mural, once you've clicked on the link, it should not require you to register or anything. You can just go onto the board and you're able to zoom in by either pressing Control+ or Control- on your keyboard, and that will allow you to zoom in and out of the screen. or at the bottom right-hand side, you will see a little plus and minus with a little sort of like toggle thing in between, which you can use to help you zoom in and out. And once you're on the board, in order to add a sticky note or ideas, what you can do is simply double tap on the screen to add a sticky note, or alternatively, you can just use one of the few that's already on the board to add your insights. Just to read some of the inputs that others have put in, which can hopefully share some inspiration for the rest, is using knowledge to inform policy, to inform research topics, as well as trying to develop, sorry, I'm not able to see that one clearly. Trying to develop a set of guidelines informed by emerging knowledge to help countries to make the transition to circular economy. And also just to add, yes, you can resize the sticky notes if you would like to add more information to them. Oh yes, a note from Nicole, which would be helpful for a lot of people, is if you're joining, or rather if you're using your computer with a mouse, it would be much easier to navigate Mural than the trackpad. So if you do have a mouse handy, do use that, and that should be able to help. Someone is noting the potential tension between stakeholders, that is the disincentive for local government to support waste reduction in Durban. Not to put you on the spot, but I'd actually like to hear a little bit more about this comment and understand it better. So our colleague from Durban, if you don't mind just unmuting and just sharing with us what exactly the potential tension would be between stakeholders. While we wait to hopefully see whether our colleague from Durban would still be willing to share and reflect, I'd also like to read out one of the comments that was put in the chat from a colleague. Although written in French, I thought it would be valuable to actually translate this for everyone else, which is, I want the circular economy to also be welcome here in the DRC, especially in Kinshasa, because we are experiencing what we should not experience. We can act now. And so valuable insights there from Balembolo Tonda. So a reminder, if you're not able to jump onto the mural board, you're also welcome to still share your reflections on in the chat box. There's also been another reflection there on new and innovative business opportunities again, one of the ways in which you're using new and emerging knowledge to improve the sectors that we're working in. I would also like for us to then jump onto the second question, which is on the second part of the board. So Zakia is toggling to that so that everyone is able to see. But something that has been what we'd like to see from that is what barriers are we seeing to the application of circular economy knowledge in different parts of Africa, as well as in different sectors. So what challenges are you experiencing when it comes to applying circular economy and the circular economy knowledge that's coming up right now? We've already seen a few inputs. One of them is the misalignment between national development priorities across countries. And that's a key one, especially when we think of the different ways in which circular economy can be implemented. A lot of the very early discussions around circular economy were highlighting that we are all thinking about circular economy differently, and we are all understanding its application differently. Entry points to circular economy, how we approach circular economy in Africa is very different from how it's approached in, say, the European context. And so again, seeing further misalignment when it now comes to national development priorities across countries. So at whatever scale we're working on, there needs to be that collaborative or co-developed vision for circular economy. Again, we're seeing vested interest and silo thinking. That's definitely a challenge, especially when we have new ideas that are emerging that, for example, in the government space, might not have a specific department or sector that you could align circular economy to. I think the government officials in this room can attest to wondering where circular economy should sit, to having discussed questions around who should lead the circular economy and what happens when everyone starts doing something but has not checked with other colleagues on how they are taking on circular economy. And what that leads to is a lot of silo thinking, as well as siloed development of approaches and activities. So thinking through how can we then shift away from siloed thinking, as well as how do we manage vested interests that that may emerge. Again, we're seeing that comment on potential tensions between stakeholders, disincentives for local government to support waste reduction in Durban. We're also seeing, again, limited understanding within local government and limited political support. I'm wondering if the person who wrote that comment would be interested in sharing a little bit on what challenges are emerging when it comes to limited knowledge and limited understanding from local government officials, as well as if anyone would also be able to reflect on the challenges that come with lacking political support to implementing circular economy ideas.
Would you like me to just talk to it?
Yes, please.
Great, all right. That was my comment. It came about when I was looking at a questionnaire, and it was going to go to local government officials working in waste management and local economic development. And I was advised at the time that the term circular economy just didn't have enough traction to be asked in a survey. So I think in general, except for the metros, which, some of the metropolitan municipalities are getting on board with circular economy, and they are seeing more interest and cooperation between the waste department and the economic development department. But I think in district municipalities, local municipalities, in rural and some of the other secondary cities, there isn't that same acknowledgement of the term. And then the political support, that's also coming down to council and ward councillor level. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. And I think something I'm also just adding, in addition to what you've noted, is acknowledgement of the term, and that also again speaking to how you get buy-in for different activities in local government. If something is not aligned either with national mandates or say with the mayor's mandate, it then doesn't get picked up. But also we do see that when terms are garnering global interest, we then see a lot of support for them. So when we think of the term green economy, for example, we then see implementation as well as interest and funding, because sometimes what most people are then concerned about as well as looking to resolve is what then gets prioritized. So what does that mean for local governments? But also at the same time, what are the pressing challenges that cities are facing, and how can circular economy be used to resolve those? So not placing the focus on just circular economy, but looking at how it can then be aligned to respond to the challenges that government is looking to respond to. So what are the already existing politically supported activities, and how can circular economy be linked to those? I'm seeing another note there, which is people don't see the circular economy as being that important. We're seeing another that's noting that we have inadequate political goodwill. I'm just zooming into one more here. I know that you're still writing, but I'm going to start trying to read it. And this is, I believe that the circular economy knowledge is with us. We don't know it by the jargon. Maybe the local communities can be allowed to call it by their local languages so as to bring the message home. And I'm wondering if, without having to put you on the spot, Christine, if you would be willing to just add on to the reflection that you've shared on the terminology around circular economy and people's understanding of it. Please feel free, Christine, to just share a little bit on that. But while we wait for you, I'll also just read another note that has been put up, which is costs and budget constraints. It's easier and cheaper to do business as usual, waste collection and disposal. And so then that's what that gets focused on. In the chat from Edward, we're also seeing lack of knowledge and understanding of circular economy at the national level of government. So again, we're seeing that need for political support at high levels in order to see circular economy, not knowledge, but also activities and actions be materialized, how we can then see action for circular economy. Do we have any final reflections on that part of the mural before we move on to the next? If we do not have any further comments, I will try to translate the one that's just come in. But the next portion of the mural looks at, now that we've thought about the barriers and challenges that exist, what are the gaps and opportunities in circular economy knowledge and implementation that you could think of? So already one of the inputs that's been included is an adequate resource capacity. Another is on regional collaboration and business models and business model development and knowledge exchange. I'd like to hear a few more voices from the crowd as well on what your thoughts are. Not to pick on anyone, but maybe Ivy, if you have any thoughts that you would like to share, please do unmute.
Hi, Jokudu. Sorry, today I was in and out of the conference webinar, so I wasn't able to follow thoroughly. But I think, let me just bring my piece based on the conversation I was having with my colleague yesterday. So we are trying to apply for a research grant to do a project looking at reducing the use of plastic bags. And then whilst we were discussing the possibilities and the way of using behavior change models and all that, she brought up the option, the issue of the problems that comes with the alternatives that we always introduce. And she was talking about, when we talk about paper, we are talking about deforestation. When we talk about using cloth shopping bags, they're talking about washing it and how much water we use in washing it and all that. Then it kept me thinking that, so everything that we come up with will have an excuse for not using it, then what do we do going forward? Because reduction is the first thing when it comes to circular economy. So if everything that is being proposed, people look at the nitty-gritties and try to punch holes into them and say that, okay, so if you use maybe a cloth shopping bag and wash it, once is equivalent to using plastic. So should we still use plastics? Is that what you are saying? So I think maybe in advocacy for circular economy and looking for alternatives or looking for ways to reduce our consumption and reuse our resources, we should try as much as possible to make people understand this nitty-gritty so that they don't think so much deep into the other effects that will come from the alternative. That could be negligible, but just to give ourselves an excuse not to do what we are supposed to do. Because that colleague of mine kind of brings that up to give herself that soothing reason not to do what she is supposed to do. So even UNEP says this, even this person says that. So just to bring that on board for us to reason along as we advocate for circular economy.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That's a good reflection. Again, an opportunity there. From that challenges, how do we then find ways to shift the ways in which people think about circular economy and how they can also adapt and include circular economy activities and practices into their everyday lives? How do we then transition from knowledge being created into taking action for circular economy? And so although the barrier there is, or the gap there is seeing how we learn about sustainability, about circularity, but then when we go into our homes, we don't necessarily practice that, or we find further barriers to being able to take on these practices that we know from reading are actually valuable and important steps that we need to take. So how do we then shift away from that, and what tools and mechanisms do we need to put in place in order to improve the ways in which we take on circular economy? Further examples and opportunities that have been included on the mural, one of them is massive employment or livelihood opportunities in creating new businesses in the circular economy space. Another input that's also just come in is information for consumers on what are the best options. So again, not just noting that we need to change the ways in which we consume products, but to actually share information on practical ways in which people can do that, so that so that consumers are able to then make better choices because they see better choices. But also going back to insights that have been shared from the papers, specifically the policy paper on EPR policy, how can we then get our producers to create these enabling environments? What tools can they put in place to help us? Can we get further insights? I'm just going to call out a few names that I'm seeing. We have Leanne. Do you have any reflections to share? We also have Celine Dile, as well as Shazia. I hope I have pronounced your name right. Feel free to just unmute and share any of your reflections on opportunities that you may have seen to implementing circular economy knowledge within your context. We also have Seth with us. I'd like to hear from you, Seth. We also have Malonga with us. I'd like to hear from you as well on whether you have any thoughts that you would like to add. It could be to this specific question that we are on the mural right now, or any of the others that we've already covered.
Mukesa from Nairobi.
Hi, Mukesa.
I'm fine. Well, I'm really keen to look at the jobs forecast and just like an overview of how jobs look like in Africa as with the circular economy. So if there's a specific report that can do an employability forecast, I'm really keen on that.
Thank you so much, Mukesa, for that reflection. I'm also not familiar with any products that have been written or papers that have been written on jobs. But again, this is then highlighting an opportunity or a space in which we could be looking into in order to apply circular economy knowledge. Are we creating the right jobs for the circular economy? And what jobs, again, would be most beneficial? If we do not have any further inputs on gaps and opportunities, one last thing we would have liked to do is just to get a sense of whether there are any case studies that you have seen that you would like to see documented on circular economy activities that are coming across the continent. We remember from input by Sarah earlier on that she was inspired by some of the case studies that she saw in the paper, as well as, again, from different spaces and environments that she's been in that have shown how she can improve her business, and I believe would have responded to some of the piloting work that she's undertaken. So again, it's always good to hear what new cases and examples are emerging across the continent. So if we could jump onto the last quadrant in the on the mural and just share some case studies that you would like to share with the group. Someone has noted there that it would be great to have a sharing platform for stakeholders. And that would definitely be a very valuable consideration. And one that I will add onto there is is from Footprints Africa, and this is a knowledge hub that includes a variety of case studies and examples that that you can use to apply in different contexts. We've also seen from the chat a number of cases and examples that Sarah has shared, which offer different insights into the circular economy. Some of them are research pieces, others are actual examples of work that is being done in different contexts. So what examples have you seen within your communities of circular economy? What activities have you undertaken? And perhaps to find out whether there are any other communities or spaces where people are learning about circular economy that that others within this group could learn from and share as well.
Okay, can I come in?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so this is not directly me, but my dad, when I was a kid, I remember and I never really got a chance to see what he told me, but I got a chance to see what he was doing, which was a bit circular, I would say. So my dad used to run a farm, and then he used to collect food waste for the pigs. And I remember going with him to restaurants which we term as chop bars in Ghana, where local eating places where they usually produce or make local foods with lots of cassavas and plantains. And then every morning he goes around picking the leftovers from the food, the peels plus the food waste themselves. And then we go to fruit markets to pick up the waste from pineapple, watermelon, mangoes, and these were the feed that he was giving to the pigs. And then he used to also go to the fruits and the food waste ones. I was with him, but then the one that he told me personally, which I didn't understand, was circular economy, but I kind of felt it was a good waste management practice, was the picking of malt waste from Guinness, Ghana, where he told me that Guinness Ghana doesn't let anything go waste, and that they have systems that make them reuse their wastewater, and also the malt that comes from the production of Malta Guinness and Guinness itself, the waste were given to people to use as feed for their pigs. And my dad was one of those people. So he always told me about the fact that whenever he went there, there was a queue of people waiting in line to pick these waste. I don't know the current state of it right now, but I also witnessed him picking granite shells, not the hard one, but the granite, the coating on the granite itself. You know, I think when they're making the granite paste, they don't add that part to it. So there was a milling company that used to gather all that pieces that has, I don't know whether it's a husk or that alone piece of it in sacks for my dad to go and pick, because it has a rich source of protein, and so he will mix with the animal food for the animals. I don't know how these things are being done right now, but these were the things that I grew up seeing my dad do, and I think people still do a bit of it, picking food for animals.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That's actually a wonderful reflection that leads us to the closing portion of today's session, and just reminding us that there are a lot of practices for circular economy that we've been seeing in our own homes, in our own communities, and in our own cities. And essentially, we can take on circular economy in different ways and in different and in any shape or form. And so just to highlight again, one last input that has come in from the chat. This is from Celine Dele. And Celine Dele has noted that it would be great to see how circular economy could be implemented in educational spaces at basic level, apart from the case studies or the research papers at high levels of education. A very important note to note that we start learning and adopting these practices from a very young age. And if they get embedded in our minds and instilled in the ways in which we do things, we can then carry these on into the different contexts that we work in. So thank you so much, everyone, for those inputs. They're actually very valuable, and I hope everyone has been able to draw on at least one example or insight that they could take forward in other spaces. So leading us to the closing of today's session, I wanted to then just share a few resources that we've come across at Italy Africa over the past month that would hopefully be of value and again respond to some of the questions that have come up from today's discussion. So one of them is that towards the end of this year, there will be the World Circular Economy Forum, and ASEAN is hosting a number of side events leading up to the event, which will be held in December. And these will be held virtually, the side events. So if you have a moment, please fill in the survey that's being pasted in the chat in order to also then get access to the various outputs and invitations that ASEAN will be sharing on the different side events that they will be hosting. Another was an SMEP call for concepts, and this was actually shared by Sarah, who is joined us today. This is Sarah Carroll, since we do have two Sarahs in the room with us today. And this is actually an interesting SMEP call for concepts on piloting solutions that address manufacturing pollution in East Africa. And so if you or someone who you know is working in this space around manufacturing pollution or doing research in this space and would like to submit a concept, please use the link to get insights. They did already host a webinar that gave further information on the session, but you should be able to still submit interest for the call. Another resource is one which I mentioned earlier that we would share is one from Footprints Africa. They have published a comprehensive database on circular economy business initiatives in Africa. And this is also available on their Knowledge Hub as well as on a geolocated map, and as well as their stories website. So from Footprints Africa, there's actually 3 pieces that have been shared. The first one being a knowledge hub that includes a number of case studies on circular economy, a geolocated map that basically gives you a sense of what is happening with regards to circular economy across the continent, and then a link to their stories website where they have developed a number of narratives around circular economy. And then the last link